Hi, I'm Julie Cooper, half of the Kendall and Cooper duo and a writer of mysteries and thrillers with mostly military settings. I've just completed the third in a series, and I'm also a longtime reader of mysteries of all kinds, so we'll have lots to share with you. But first, I wanted to give credit for our wonderful intro music to my brother, Chris Squires, for his original composition called The Man in the Panama Hat.
Hi, I'm Wendy Kendall of Kendall and Cooper Talking Mysteries. I'm the cozy side of the spectrum, but I do love all mysteries, so Julie and I can get together on the broad spectrum of them.
And I know today we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of research, whether it's research on location, people, professions, or even weapons. In our last episode, we talked with Erin Byrne, an award-winning travel writer, about the emphasis on a mystery's intriguing locations and sense of place.
That's right, and that was really interesting. And today I want to sort of go in a different research direction. I want to talk about research when it comes to professions and how that can be critical to the integrity of mysteries, the integrity of the story really holding together. So, for the Cozy Mystery series that I'm writing, my part in mystery research has taken a lot of different routes. I'm interested in women's history, murder investigations, murder methods, purses. I know that sounds a little funny with a murder mystery, but remember it's a cozy, and museum curating and what that's like. So I've done a lot of research in library, on the internet, going to museums, talking to people who run museums. And I'm always looking for ways to gain knowledge through experience. So I like to try and seek these opportunities out and seize them. And boy, did I come upon a really great one. I was the happy winner of a police foundation raffle drawing. And I got to do a ride along with canine officers.
That's so awesome.
It was so great. So I want to tell you a little bit about some highlights about what I learned on this ride along. It started near dusk. I was happily approaching the patrol car where Officer Hobbs was waiting. And I had gifts in hand as thanks for inviting me on a nighttime ride along. And all of a sudden, it was like thunder as he saw me, barking out very loudly and intermittent growls. Officer Hobbs is a 4-year-old, all black German Shepherd police canine. His trainer and partner is Officer Jason Robinson. Jason let Hobbs out of the car to introduce us. Once Hobbs realized that Jason accepted me as okay, then he was fine with me. And at that point, made it clear that he no longer found any interest in me. Oh, so I tried not to let that hurt my feelings, since I've always thought of myself as a dog person.
Right.
But Jason nicely accepted my gifts on Hobbs' behalf, and I figured that Hobbs would warm up to me as the evening went on. He never really did. After a little runaround for Hobbs, some playtime, and a little warm-up of commands, it was time to hit the road, and I was riding with the big dog. I was greatly relieved that I got the front seat. I turned to the back to Officer Hobbs and offered him a few soothing words. He glanced at me. But I'm telling you, the dog's adrenaline when we got started, it just saturated the air. He was on complete alert, constant watch for anything and everything around him, whether inside or outside the car. His ears were forward, eyes always moving, except when resting on his partner in either expectation or devotion. His deep black hair all seemed to be standing on end, and he restlessly moved all around on the back seat platform that had been constructed. He barked loudly at every movement, and you could smell the thick urgency of his spirit. So I buckled my seatbelt and looked around the cramped passenger seat. The computer and other electronics overflowed from the center of the car. Screens and radios and other equipment were all in handy reach for the driver. I later found out how very much they were all used. When Jason slid into the driver's seat, his welcoming smile and easy conversation cut the doggone tension. Dogs like Officer Hobbs are a particular advantage on the night shifts when they can see and optimize other senses better than their human partners. The dogs use all their senses to help their people partners. So Hobbs normally works the night shift, but he is on call for other times. And the canines are called upon for tracking people. But sometimes when they're tracking, they also end up discovering evidence. Their usefulness is in the immediacy of the chase. Their skills are most effective within 4 hours of an incident. After that, scent trails start to fade. These police teams are not the ones who carry on with the investigation of cases like the detectives do. These teams are for the immediate chase and tracking. Then they move off to the next incident, and they have to be able to leave the follow-up behind them. I think that would be a problem for me. I'm a cozy mystery detective. I like to solve the case.
Not track them down, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, usually Hobbs will find his target suspect, but in some cases he just finds evidence instead. For example, there was a story about a house break-in when Hobbs found a jacket and a paper note, and both items turned out to be direct evidence that tied the suspect, who was later caught. Officer Hobbs wears police identification vest and collar, and he is suited with a bulletproof vest. Jason, the human partner, his normal police equipment that he wears, including radio, mace, gun, and so on, weighs an extra 20 pounds to carry around and to run with when he's trying to keep up with Hobbs.
Goodness.
It was so exciting to watch them practice their work on their training, quote unquote, breaks. Hobbs is so well disciplined. He has to react to commands literally in an instant and with a super degree of attention. He could be given a command, a series of commands like out of the car, down, then attack, then call off the attack, then back in the car, then back to attack, and all of that in just a matter of maybe 10 seconds.
Amazing.
Yeah, the precision is like a very exacting dance choreography, and this dog is unbelievably fast. The demonstration of the attack command with Jason wearing a protective arm sleeve was most impressive, and I hope I'm never on the business end of that dog command.
I'm visualizing lots of teeth.
Lots of teeth.
Yeah.
Once when he was younger, Hobbs was given the attack command in a real pursuit, and he ran to the culprit, but he didn't attack because he didn't see the arm protective sleeve. So he was confused. So instead, he just barked and growled and cornered the culprit without attacking because the quote unquote game wasn't right.
I see.
But he's matured since then. But yes, Hobbs sees all this as a game. When he does well, he gets rewarded by playing his favorite game, which is with a fetch ball that also has a handle so they can play tug of war with it. And of course, he also earns treats. But it's great that Hobbs' games are protecting our community. So what I didn't understand is, how do these dogs really track? So it's all biology. So we're going to get a little bit graphic here. People shed dead skin cells all the time. And these are a personal imprint of their scent. And it could also include additions like perfume or sweat. But a dog can pick up this scent and be disciplined to follow this invisible trail of dead skin cells. As the dog follows the trail, that trail is being crossed and crisscrossed and intersected by all kinds of other invisible scents, which the dog has to be disciplined to ignore. And the dog has to just focus on the subject's trail only. Those interfering invisible trails could be other people, food, animals. Some
Squirrels.
squirrels is a great example.
Yeah, squirrels, yeah.
So these Hobbs has to ignore and just zero in on his assigned scent. And that's when the game is really afoot.
That sounds like amazing discipline.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the dead skin cells can rest on places for a time, but sometimes they can be stirred up by the wind, and that can send the dog in the wrong direction. And also sometimes a dog can outrun the skin cell trail because he's running so fast, and maybe the culprit turned a corner, and so the dog then goes past it. And then the dog would have to backtrack a little to see where he can pick up that scent again. And dead skin cells can float on top of a water surface. So actually, suspects can be tracked over water. That is a myth that they can't.
Ah.
And light rain in particular is great because that makes the cells stay in place. The Pacific Northwest has great weather conditions for tracking, including not being too hot. However, if it's heavy rain, that's tougher for tracking, like if you're in a really heavy downpour.
Right.
So there's trouble tracking if a suspect is running like to a hidden car that then drives away. So for example, Officer Hobbs was tracking repeated robberies of this small pharmacy in town. They were robbing the pharmacy and then running around the block to an accomplice with a hidden car who then drove away. So that was so frustrating for the tracking team.
I'll bet.
And when they were caught, it turned out a pharmacy employee was driving the getaway car, and his friend was doing the robbery that the employee had designed with his inside information.
Ah, okay.
Oh, so what are other advantages of these cunning canines? These dogs can cover distance fast. Suspects have a head start, and usually they've planned out what they're doing and are in familiar surroundings, so they know where they're going. They know alleyways and also corridors of apartment buildings, but these are also places that a canine can run through quickly. Also, they can track through backyards. Hobbs once found a suspect after a long chase through many backyards. The suspect thought he was hidden well enough by locking himself in a garden shed, but Hobbs figured out where he was.
That I would have loved to have seen.
Well, the devotion of those two partners is obvious. Hobbs watches Jason's every move, and when Jason is away from the car without Hobbs, the dog is ever watchful and anxious. Hobbs is very much an alpha dog. He's absolutely fearless, and without thought, he'll leap off of high boulders or ledges or run at full speed, potentially headlong into painful obstructions. There was one story about how he was charging through a field of far overgrown grass and weeds, and he ran directly face first into a metal trailer hitch that was hidden.
Ow.
Yeah, it was hidden in the
Ow.
overgrowth. And
Ugh.
and keep in mind, he's working in the dark at night. So, but they did catch the suspect. But it wasn't until the dog was all the way back to the patrol car before anybody even realized he was streaming blood from his dramatic injury.
Aw.
Yeah. So sometimes his fearlessness is also aggravated, Jason says, by his clumsiness. Because I guess Hobbs,
Somehow I didn't picture him as a klutz, but he really is an athlete in many ways.
he is an athlete, but apparently Officer Hobbs is a little clumsy.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
But
Well, it sounds like a great experience, Wendy.
it was. Hobbs is a really smart character. For example, when Jason picks up the dashboard mic for his police radio, because he talks to dispatch a lot throughout the night, no matter how discreetly he tries to reach for it, Hobbs will hear and he'll start barking so he can talk with dispatch too.
Oh, okay. Doesn't want to be left out.
No, Hobbs is
No.
always excited to go on patrol, and no matter where he is at home or if he appears to be sleeping, when Jason takes the car keys off their hook, Hobbs is instantly running for the car.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah.
and he's always paired with officer with Jason, correct?
Yes, and he lives with Jason and his family. He has two
Okay.
teenage daughters and his wife. So yeah, Officer Hobbs has his off-duty time too.
Nice.
Yeah, our small town is so fortunate that these public servants put their lives on the line for us. Years ago, a friend had invited Jason on a ride along, and it just took that one time out, and Jason was inspired. And after three more times on a ride along, he was hooked. He says he loves the discipline and the excitement of the tracking just as much as his partner Hobbs does.
Oh,
And they've excelled at an incredible amount of canine partner training together to become officers. And they continue to excel in their annual certification tests. So during my ride along, I got to experience the thrill of speeding to a call from dispatch with lights and siren, and Hobbs enthusiastically barking loudly right behind my ear. So we worked on calls that night for shoplifts, domestic violence. That's really scary.
those would be scary.
Yeah, so unpredictable. And other disturbances, some involving drugs and others not. We did a stakeout and we checked for mailbox thefts. And we were driving around parts of town that I didn't even know about in order just to observe and look for things and activities that are out of place while residents are sleeping. I'm telling you, businesses and homes are so fortunate to have this protection.
Sounds great. It sounds
Yeah.
like an experience everybody should have someday in some ways.
I really encourage, if you ever have a chance to really experience your research, have at it.
Great.
What
Well,
about what
I'm
about
going to
you?
talk.
Sorry,
Go
Julie,
ahead.
but
Go ahead.
I'm hoping that you're going to tell me something about how you do your research.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about research and why research matters. And I know this is a topic that we've addressed, both of us, together in writing workshops that we've given for Pacific Northwest Writers Conference, and another program that we're going to be presenting soon at Right in the Harbor in Gig Harbor at the Tacoma Community College's Gig Harbor campus. And you and I have discussed this at length, and we often call this segment "How to Kill Your Mystery in One Easy Step." And people often say, "Well, what is that?" The cardinal sin of mystery writers is no. Wait, I think I'll leave you in suspense for just a little longer. And usually we get great participation from the audience when we're talking about this, because I stop and ask them, have you ever read a mystery until you reached one fact, one statement, one plot twist, or one event, and it stopped you in your tracks? It's something that you read across and you realize it's so implausible, so wrong, or naive that it disrupts your fictive dream as a reader. And if you've seen that, if it stopped you or made you put a book down, then you've encountered what I'm talking about, that cardinal sin of mysteries. Well, it's called implausibility, and we'll define this as naive, impossible, or preposterous assumptions which destroy your plot and your credibility as a writer. Game over. And even James Fenimore Cooper, author of arguably the first American best-selling thriller or adventure novel, The Deerslayer, was guilty of this. Years ago, many, many years ago, another brilliant writer, Mark Twain, wrote a very snarky essay about James Fenimore Cooper entitled Fenimore Cooper's Literary Offenses. He went on to list 18 out of a possible 19 literary offenses committed by James Fenimore Cooper in just one page of The Deerslayer. To paraphrase Mr. Twain, when writing, the writer should let miracles alone, or if they venture a miracle, the author must so plausibly set it forth as to make it look both possible and reasonable. So, there are simple ways to avoid this dreaded offense and write better fiction, and the prime directive is to do your research. Good research produces good writing. So, with that in mind, here are some tips for writers. From a wonderful best-selling writer of legal thrillers, Bob Dugoni, he uses an acronym about this whole process, BARF, B-A-R-F. It stands for Before Anything, Research First. Why? Because what you learn up front from your research will inform and shape your fiction in unexpected and wonderful ways. It will not only give you credibility, it will help make you a better writer. So, another tip, know what you don't know and then go out and learn something. Here's a personal example. In many of my books, I write about military settings. But do I seem like a woman who'd know anything about the range and trajectory of surface-to-surface missiles? No.
No way.
Nope, sorry, no. But I needed to know for a book I was working on. So first I did a lot of research online. You'll be amazed at what you can find online. And I also know who to ask. An engineer who worked on missiles. And a lot of his work still hasn't been declassified, but we'll keep that between us. But he answered my questions beautifully and gave me the confidence in the information I did use in the book that I knew I was presenting it in a credible and straightforward manner. Another example, if I wanted to know what it's like to serve on a nuclear sub, I have a writer friend who's former Navy person who is an expert, served for 8 years on nuclear subs, so I know who to ask. Part of the way that you can develop this kind of know who to ask resource is to do networking at writers' events, industry events, and just plain being curious. So, you need to do your research up front so you know what is and isn't possible. And if it isn't possible, maybe what you're writing is really science fiction, not a mystery. Following on that thought, be careful about stretching your reader too far. I'm reminded of those truly awful nylon pantyhose of the 80s. For those of us who were business women back in that era and suffered through that, they'd look great coming out of the package. They'd stretch out after you wore them. They'd bag out at the knees, and they'd never go back. The same can be said of readers that realize that you've stretched their credibility a little too far. So, go ask an expert. Get into the learning mindset, ask around, and find someone who can answer your questions. Be prepared, be respectful, and be professional in your approach. Experts will tell you what's possible and what's not. And I'm thinking back to Wendy's great experience doing the ride-along with a police officer and a canine officer, the beautiful German Shepherd named Officer Hobbs. And I've also got a couple of don'ts for you in regards to writers doing research. First, don't do an info dump, showing or telling all that you now know about the subject. And if your crit group comes back to you with a comment that this section reads like a textbook, yes, that's happened to me, you've gone too far and you need to rewrite it. A lot of the data that you learn about may never make it into your book, but it will inform your writing and it will make you more credible. So, closely following this is another don't. Don't backload. Develop and show the expertise in your sleuth or your protagonist or your investigator early on in your story, so that they have the skills and the capabilities in a convincing way to combat obstacles or track down the villain or the antagonist later in your book without alarm bells going off in your reader's head. That expertise might be something like your heroine knowing how to fly a helicopter, or your protagonist being able to translate ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics so that he can escape from a tomb. Whatever it is, layer it into the beginning when your reader's just getting to know your main characters. Last but not least, foreshadow early and often, leaving breadcrumbs along the way, regardless of what type of mystery, suspense, or thriller work of fiction you're producing. You're the writer, you're in control, and can go back and sneak in subtle micro-tension and clues into your plot, shading and shadowing like an artist, right where you need it. No foreshadowing results in a really irritated reader, one who may make it to the end of the book, but will never take a chance on another title from the same author. I'm thinking of a cozy mystery I read last year by a very accomplished writer, and at the end, one woman is revealed as a crazed, violent psycho, one completely motivated by greed. I didn't see that coming, which is not always a bad thing in a mystery, certainly, but there was no foreshadowing, no hints of a darker side to this character whatsoever. Zip, nada, nothing. I even went back and reread parts of the book, wondering what I'd missed. Would I read another one of her books? What do you think? So in conclusion, do yourself a favor and do your research first. Your readers will be grateful. And next, I've got a brief recommendation on a mystery. Actually, it's a thriller, and it's called American Assassin by the late, great Vince Flynn. Now, if you don't like thrillers, don't read this book, because yes, it's filled with a lot of violence, bad people in bad places doing some bad things. But really, it's an origin story on Vince Flynn's archetypal anti-hero, Mitch Rapp, a book that was written years after his series of 11 bestsellers was started. And unusual for military or political thrillers, this book features some really insightful character development on several series characters, along with brilliant, page-turning plotting and pacing. And I'm going to turn it over to Wendy because I feel certain she has something related to canines for her recommendations.
That's right. I am on the dog trail right now. So
Okay.
I've got a couple of books that I recommend for a canine that's integral to a mystery and an author who's researched small town police very well. Try J.A. Jance's newest Joanna Brady suspense novel. It's called Downfall. And for a canine thriller, I recommend Silent Partner by Jennifer Chase. It's about Northern California's elite police canine units. And this is a suspense ride. Sorry, now I messed that up. But I'm going to tell you for real. This is a suspense ride along that will keep you guessing to the bitter end.
I'm going to have to find that. It sounds great.
Yeah, that one is really amazing. So I hope that today we've shown people how much fun that research can be. It's really great.
It
And
can be.
thanks so much for everybody for listening. What do you say, Julie? Shall we wrap it up?
I think it's about that time, and I'm going to tease our listeners because we have an upcoming interview with a best-selling thriller writer, and he's going to tell us some amazing things we don't know about technology. And I'd also like to add that he's also partnered with Clive Cussler on a couple of books, thrillers. So I'm really looking forward to that interview coming up very soon. Thank you, everyone, and keep writing.